Normally, the way this podcast works is either Rohin and I, we give an introduction about setting up the topic, talking about what's happening, explaining the conflict, etc. Today, I'm just going to explain it in one sentence, and I'm going to do a very journalistic thing because I'm going to quote my two guests who have done a lot of work explaining this topic on their own respective websites, social media, etc. Today's episode is about AI disrupting traditional software as a service model, and I'm going to start with my first guest. AI is killing the software as a service model. I'm going to start with my first guest. And here's what he wrote. Quote, software ate the world, SaaS ate software, and now AI will eat SaaS. That's Sumant Raghvendra, co-founder and CEO of Presentations.ai, one of the many AI startups that have suddenly spawned out there. Sumant is also the co-founder of The Ken. He's a serial entrepreneur. He's been doing this for a while. He's seen cycles go up and down. So tell us, Sumant, why do you believe that AI will destroy SaaS?
Hey, Praveen. So to me, asking if AI threatens SaaS is like asking if automobiles threatened horse carriages, right? So of course they did. But the smart carriage makers didn't keep making better whips, right? They started making car bodies, right? So I think the big trap that we are falling into is that thinking that AI is a technology problem. So to me, it's not a technology problem. It's a business model revolution disguised as a technology problem. So the threat isn't so much to SaaS itself as it is to the fundamental business model that Indian SaaS is built on top of.
Okay, fine. I'm going to go to my
Interesting.
second.
I love that, right? Which is, it's a business model evolution disguised as a technology evolution. We'll come back to that, Sumant. I really love that.
I'm going to go to my second guest, and I quote something that he put on Twitter sometime last year.
X.
Now X. AI-powered IT services is the beginning of the end of all point SaaS business models. In a few years, it will be cheaper to build and run custom software than it is to buy SaaS by the seat. We'll understand what that means. Welcome, Sidhu Ponnappa, co-founder and CEO of realfast.ai, another AI startup threatening to disrupt SaaS. Sidhu started his career in ThoughtWorks in 2005. He co-founded a couple of companies after that. He co-founded this company called Active Labs, which I believe he started as a side hustle. After that, he co-founded this other company called C42 Engineering, which was acquired by Gojek in 2015. At Gojek, Sidhu was the MD of Gojek India. He grew India's operations from 800 people over the next 3 years. And he was also the Chief Information Officer of Gojek Singapore and a member of its board of directors. Welcome, Sidhu.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us, why is AI going to disrupt SaaS? Tell us, why is AI going to disrupt SaaS?
Look, I tend to view SaaS as one of the solutions to a larger problem, which is that software is painful in many respects, right? It's risky to build, it's expensive to build, it takes time to build, it takes skill to build. I think also underappreciated, it takes a certain culture and org structure to build, right? And there are multiple solutions to this over the last several decades. If you remember, like in the 90s, it was all custom software, right? You had all these big companies going to Computer Associates, and then getting these client server things that they would build out from scratch.
Yeah, I mean, people who have, some of the listeners in this episode are very young to remember server rooms inside companies.
I know. Yeah. The thing is, I guess when you see that the shifts and the problems there, right? Like the core problems were this. Distribution was a problem, right? Like how do we get updates out to our customers? SaaS was a very effective solution to a large subset of these problems, right? And now what's happening is the ability to attack some of those problems from entirely new angles using AI is opening up. So now the interesting question to ask is, if you take that same constellation of problems and you say, okay, cost now starts dropping by first 50% and then starts trending to an order of magnitude drop. Delivery timelines go through the same transition. First a linear drop and then an exponential drop as things really bake. What does this mean now for the person who's, the founder of a SaaS company or, an equivalent business who's like, listen, I want to solve my customer's problem using software. Right? There are models. You could argue equally that this is the distinction between a taxi company and Uber, right? A taxi company outsources its software. Uber builds its software in-house. They say, we will take on the overheads of org structure, culture, yada, this, so that, to all that stuff. We will eat that damage because it's hard, as does Amazon, right? And that is a solution to the same problem. You're saying, look, we are going to build the muscle in-house to build the software. That's what Klarna is saying. What Klarna is saying is now the overheads of certain classes of software have dropped far enough that earlier it was not cost and time effective for us to build in-house. Now it is. Now, whether that is a valid claim or not is an entirely different matter. My point is the claim is now being made.
Okay.
So my point over here is that we are going to see a trend in the next few years where SaaS that we're solving for software being time and money consuming to build, where they're saying we'll build the software for you and then we'll amortize the cost and risk across. That goes away because the risk of software and the cost of software is tied to timelines.
Understood. We'll come to Klarna, we'll come to all the other examples. Let's just step back. Put yourself in the
PG,
shoes.
I just want to make one observation.
Yes.
Many of us in this room are old enough to remember the .com boom and were around in the .com boom. I just want to make an observation that we are now in the .ai boom.
Yeah.
Sumant is co-founder and CEO of presentations.ai. Sidhu is co-founder and CEO of realfast.ai.
Yeah.
And we're the boomers from the ken.com.
Have you guys bought the domain yet?
No.
No, we haven't.
This is
We're
the
not falling
first
for that.
time.
Let's buy all the domains trap. I thought we moved away from it.
This is the first time you put it into our heads. Okay, I get what you're saying, Sidhu. I get what you're saying, Sumant. Let's just step back for a second. I want to step back and put yourself in the shoes of somebody, perhaps a listener of this episode who, let's say, is working in a tech company. Let's say is probably an entry-level or a mid-level person, uses a set of SaaS software. So I'm giving examples. I imagine if they're an engineer, they'd be using something like, say, Jira in order to file tickets. Of course, they are. They'll be using a software like that, which is a SaaS software. I imagine if they're salespeople, they'll be using a software like Expensify to going and filing expenses and sending it back. If you're a finance person, you'll probably be using what? Something similar in order to do all your ERP, in order to check your finance statements, in order to make your adjustments, etc. Or if you are perhaps a salesperson, you are using Salesforce. So what changes now for these people?
Yeah, I know a lot of our listeners will know what SaaS is, but I think it just bears repeating because we're talking about software and SaaS interchangeably. The way I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, simply put, software as a service is your software isn't installed on your local machine per se, but resides in the cloud. You type in an address into your browser and the software runs in your browser. Would that be like a fairly... there'll be complexities within that, but can we agree?
That's a fair summary.
Fair. So we're talking about software that used to run in the cloud and in your browser. Yeah. And the interesting point is Suman says that it's under threat. You're saying custom software is coming back, and back to your point about SaaS.
So let me just expand on that point itself, right? The software as a service, and specifically what was the Indian playbook for SaaS, right? So I think the one thing that software as a service originally with the likes of Salesforce did was that it changed the model in which people bought and used software, right? So that's the entire belief behind this no software kind of motto that Salesforce famously pioneered, even though, like you said,
Mark Benioff famously...
they were actually running the software on the cloud instead of on the local systems, right? So what did Indian SaaS startups do, right? They went one step ahead, right? They basically took that same model and married it with this efficiency arbitrage model, that playbook that we are very good at, right? So which is you take a software that 100 people, you require 100 people in the West to build. You replace it with a team of 30 people in India, and then you sell it for 20% of the price, right? That's essentially what they did, right? We are more efficient in building that kind of software, and we are more efficient in selling it at a lower price. So that was the arbitrage.
I get it. So use an example. I guess the most famous classical example is a company called Zendesk, which basically did customer support and all of that software. And then there was Freshdesk, now Freshworks, which basically did almost exactly the same thing but offered it at a much lower price because they were able to build it at a much lower price.
Or if you go one step back, what Zoho did with Zoho CRM versus, let's say, Salesforce. Right. So that was the model that they followed. And now I guess the question in my mind is, how does AI change this, right? How does it impact this efficiency arbitrage, right? So you look at the classic SaaS model of land and expand, so which was what companies like Zoho and Freshworks also pioneered by using what we
Land
call
and expand.
land and expand model of, the desktop selling model.
What does that mean?
So basically what happens is, let's say you have a company that comes in and buys 100 licenses of your software today, right? The key aspect of growth is, in a year from now, how much more has that revenue grown, right? So there's something called NRI, which is your expansion ratio, which basically says that if you have sold 100 seats in a year, if you have gone to 130 seats, you're doing well, right? So there were all these classic equations which now seem very antiquated, but at that time they were the state of the art in terms of assessing how a SaaS company actually did. And obviously billions of dollars of VC money followed these kinds of equations. But now all of that is...
Why is it antiquated now?
Because you no longer can charge by seats, right? So now people are now thinking about outcomes. So again, going back to what Sidhu said, right? Where now people are no longer worried about, okay, what kind of features I have, what kind of, how many people I need to be able to deliver something. They're only bothered about what is the outcome that the software can
you
deliver.
can see the directionality of this in Salesforce's Agentforce, right? Very clearly. Probably, like right now, Salesforce is probably poised to be potentially the most successful large-scale deployment of agents on the planet, right? That is the direction. Like, it's a metaverse level commitment.
Just to be clear, we are not talking about human agents, secret agents, etc. We are talking about software AI agents. Can you please tell us, what does a AI agent mean?
An AI agent is a process that involves LLMs that make decisions. This is crucial. Like earlier, you would run processes on computers, but the decisions were algorithmic. Here, there are, much more subtle, the kind of decisions that LLMs make that are
Give
so
me
hard
an example of a AI agent that makes decisions.
You would, for example, run a pipeline to produce a response to a customer, and then an agent would potentially then review that to say, do I sound too corporate? Now, if you had to algorithmically encode the concept of too corporate, could you do it using traditional ML? Probably, though with some effort, etc. Could you do it without ML? No, you couldn't. But now it's trivial.
So it's almost like you have trained an AI to solve a very point problem.
The textbook definition of an agent is basically it's a software entity that observes and acts on your behalf. So basically, the idea is eventually it'll become a drop-in for a human agent. Today, what a human would do, for instance, an AI agent would do that just as efficiently, probably better so, and obviously at a much lower cost than what a human.
Or to be fair, that's the claim.
Yes.
I mean, would the most common or easily understandable example of this be, let's say, customer support?
Yes.
Right? Like I order something from Swiggy or Blinkit and I get into a chat with their quote-unquote person who's welcoming me and thanking me for having a conversation. I send them photos of whatever was a badly delivered product and they refund me. It was a decision that was taken to refund or not refund. I would not be surprised if it's already happening, though I have no...
But
would that be an example of an agent?
These are already happening, but they are done with traditional systems not involving LLMs. What LLMs allow you to do is to include steps of judgment, reasoning, and assessment that are very... Like I said, does this sound corporate? Read this email. Does it sound corporate? Yes or no?
So to your example,
subjective
right? Let's say
judgments.
it's a customer support.
There's a large element of subjectivity that has come in because of the training corpus.
So chatbots, for instance, they've been around for a long time. True. Like exactly like what you were saying, the likes of Swiggy and Uber have always been using it for a long time. But now I think the idea always has been that originally a chatbot was good for first level kind of service requests, and then you had to necessarily escalate it to a human agent who would then take over and do
to make a subjective decision.
Yes. When there is something that's a little more, let's say, not as discrete or not as evident as that a machine could take a decision on your behalf, you would not trust it to do it because of the limitations of the technology and the underlying models that powered those decisions, right? So when you had simple rules, it's easy enough for a chatbot to do it. But like Sidhu said, now when you have a lot more nuances inside it, you would probably want a more sophisticated.
So I wanted to stick with the services example to get started. But if what I would prefer to also talk about is a more complex example, right? Something, your question was subjectivity, judgment. Why is that so valuable? Right? And one part of it is, look, sometimes this stuff is just too expensive to encode. The concept of corporate text it's cheaper to use an LLM. It can already do it for you, right? Why would you say it? But there is another aspect to this where the judgment
Why
is
would I mean, you keep coming back to corporate. Is it sounding corporate? Why is this so? Why is this example so important?
Because the way you would qualify and define something as corporate is one of those things which is a matter of subjective judgment. You would basically need to assemble 1,000 examples or 10,000 examples of text and say this
what
is
do I do
corporate,
with
this is
Help
not.
me understand that, right? Let's say this is some kind of an agent which has to determine is this or is this not corporate. What happens next? What if it is corporate? Then
If it is corporate, then the agent will hand it back after having assessed it to the original agent that wrote it and said, my feedback is this is too corporate. Here are examples of what sounds too corporate. Here's counter examples that is more in line with our current brand language. Can you rephrase these? And the original agent that wrote that will now rewrite it.
so it's two AIs talking to each other.
Potentially 2, maybe 3. Generally, there is no theoretical limit, but in practice, what we've seen is 2 or 3 agents is where it stays effective, and then after that, it starts to become like, it starts to decohere into like,
it's like those feedback loops.
inane stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
But 2 or 3 agents in various configurations for this kind of review, reflecting a human team of a senior, a junior, someone biased towards creating, someone biased towards checking, in various configurations, open-ended chat, round robin, whatever. There are various patterns which produce quality output, and agents are something that you would deploy to follow these patterns.
Got it.
So what's the more complex example?
The more complex example of judgment I wanted to call out is, for example, this is something that we're building internally, because one of the problems you have as a services company is you get a customer and either the customer no longer has any context on the system that they have. They've got like a 5, 8, 10-year-old Salesforce or any other, we're specializing in Salesforce implementation, and you just don't have context. And then the customer's like, hey, I need to get this done. Can you give me a timeline? And you don't even have anyone on the team who's even ready to, sit down and read the entire code base, read all the documentation, go to Jira, check all the tickets. All of that context is sitting out there. Or you have a multi-vendor system. You are one of 8 vendors working on it. And what you're doing is impacted by what someone else is doing somewhere else. You need line of sight on that. Today, we are stuck with extremely hard manual problems. There's a manager on that side who has to coordinate with all stakeholders, bubble up this, provide an assessment, give it out. What we now have is a system that just plugs into all the data sources, and you can ask it questions about what are the business rules? What are the key business objects? For this business object, what are the key workflows? Can you draw me a flow chart? This is all work you could potentially do today by hiring a very good, diligent business analyst.
Got it.
But this thing doesn't get tired. It doesn't take hours. It takes seconds. It is capable of spanning domains which a good BA would often struggle to. Like, where are you going to find a BA who will read code
Sidhu,
to this?
I got that. Sorry,
So
Praveen.
I was just going to say this,
go
that
ahead.
the summary of whatever we have discussed so far, sort of I understand like this, which is that there are 2 ends to this spectrum.
Yep.
On the leftmost side, or on one end of the spectrum, is this world of SaaS or software services, where when somebody wants to do something, either they want to make a sale or they want to make a presentation, they go to their browser, they open something like, say, Google Slides, or they open a Salesforce and they try to do some flow and they try to do some selling, pipeline, etc. And they have a bunch of people managing various parts of the organization that do this.
Yes.
And some of them are siloed, some of them are broken, some of them don't talk to each other. There are multiple things implemented. On the right side, on the extreme right side of the spectrum, if you have to really push it, it's practically someone going to a box and saying, make me a presentation for my VC that I want to
This is the
basically
holy
pitch
grail.
to. That is the holy grail.
That's the holy grail.
Right?
You just have a conversation, go back and forth, and your artifact is built.
It is built. So that's the extreme. So what you're saying is, what AI does is it pushes the leftmost thing a little bit to the right.
I want to bring the perspective of the company, because I'm one
the
of those
customer
of the customer, of the buyer of either SaaS or AI products, right? And from where we started, it was like, look, AI is so disruptive, it's going to cut down the cost by an order of magnitude, right? And now we are saying that instead of charging you for per agent seats, we will charge you for per ticket closed or results. All that is great. Now, if I'm the buyer, I'm like, Okay, does that mean that my cost dropped by 90%? Right? Does it? Though, or is this just a clever way, like, I mean, you said, right? Like, Sumant, what you were saying is that there was this gulf that existed between X is what I'm paying for my CRM software and possibly 10X is the value that I'm getting. And I was okay with that difference, that I pay X, I get 10X. Now I have to internally as a business owner evaluate, oh, it's 10X. So they're going to charge me still X. I guess it's okay. I've just moved to an outcome-based pricing, but for what value?
No. This is actually fascinating, right? So just hang on, hold that.
Thank you. I'm a very fascinating
Hold that
person.
position, right? Just hold that position right there and flip this over and look at it from the outside, back from the SaaS person.
Why do I care?
No, hang on. The SaaS person is now looking at you and saying, you are asking this question. Actually, what I have is software that changes your business fundamentally, but you lack the commitment to adopt me for all of these reasons. And you're like, man, I was getting great value out of your SaaS. Why So now suddenly the onus shifts back to the SaaS person to say, do I move away from being asset light? Do I buy my customers?
What?
Do I buy my customers? Because then we are aligned.
What does
Okay,
buy my customer mean?
Look, why is
Just to clarify, the Ken is not for sale.
Go on.
and you are not my customer. But if you take the classic example is accounting software.
Okay.
Right? I build accounting software that makes accounting firms extremely efficient on certain common processes. Say
hypothetically like Tally. Tally is a good example.
No, not Tally is accounting. I'm saying that you actually have standard offerings as an accounting firm. Someone says, come do this X type of my property tax.
Oh, okay.
I'm just cherry picking some random example.
Fine.
Right? Now, I have a software process which may or may
Let's
not
say
include
GST
Tally.
filing.
Say a GST filing, right? Now, I have a software which I'm selling to these companies. Let's say, boss, how many times do you do GST filing for your customer? If you do a lot of it, I will sell you my SaaS. It will make it, so much faster. Now I'm saying, boss, I have AI. It will not only make it so much more efficient, the number of people you need to service that particular process drops. Now, such a vendor is actually often leaving huge amounts of money on the table in terms of the overall value to the end customer who's getting their GST filing done, right? Because the intermediate customer of the software has to go through very painful changes to fully realize the benefits of the software.
Okay.
So now this has led to this halfway house where the software is not able to really maximize the value to the end customer.
So I'm a little just to clarify, what you mean is that the software is being sold. So this is like a B2B2C or B2B2B model where somebody is manufacturing some kind of a GST filing software. Accountants are using the GST filing
And the real
software
benefit accrues to the end customer.
and they are providing services to their clients. So
To
there are
their
three
clients.
parties involved.
Three
in
parties
this chain.
involved, right? And there's
Got it.
always a service provided by an established business, well understood. Real estate, accounting, whatever, right? There are 100 IT services, hundreds of these verticals, right? So now the SaaS provider potentially looks at them and says, you are a really good financial asset. Because these are traditionally
You
robust,
meaning now the end
their own
user.
customers,
Okay,
the
got it.
accounting firm, the IT services company, the what have you. These are very robust services companies. There's a reason why private equity has been buying in this space for decades. So now the argument is, you flip this over. You say, stop being shy of actually doing operations. Don't say, I'm pure software. Right? Go buy your customers, acquire their businesses, integrate your software in fully, and realize the full delta of value and get that profit. Stop charging cents on the dollar for the benefits you create.
So I'll give
Vertically integrate back up.
Sumant, what do you say?
No, 1 second. Sir. Before I'll get
This is
Sumant.
the GBO thesis from Slow Capital. I found it deeply interesting and compelling.
No, I got that. There was this person on Twitter, Webhub something from Better Capital, who also made this argument that in an outcome as a service model, what you should do is, in fact, Sam Lessin also made that point, right? That if you are a AI-based software provider, why are you in the business? I mean, because the risk is commoditization, right? If AI is so commonly available and easy to build, anyone can enter this thing, right? So the only way to build sustainable advantage is to use AI software to go ahead and acquire the business and to use that advantage to your advantage rather than to like.
Yes. So
do you agree?
The interesting flip over here is you see the entire funding chain change. The pathway for such a company is very different from the pathway of a company which is going to stay pure SaaS, never going to take on assets on the books. The financing cycle for it over 5-7 years is very different than the financial cycle for this kind of a... And this is new territory for us.
But is this...
One second. Before I get Sumanthan, I'll get Sumanthan on specifically the same point by bringing in something that Sumant himself wrote in his piece. And he writes, and I quote, while the overall SaaS industry has increased 10x over the last 15 years, it has largely remained unprofitable, which is what, I mean, Sidhu, I know you didn't say this, but what you really are saying is something similar, because you're selling it to somebody, that person is selling it to an end customer. So there is some kind of value capture that you can do. Again, I come back to Sumant's article. A recent study by Thoma Bravo revealed that the average scale SaaS company has a 71 average gross profit margin, but deeply negative net margins. That's EBITDA. Sales and marketing expenses are the reason why this happens. Every dollar of revenue requires 75 cents of marketing spend. So even before you provision for the cost of research and development and other corporate expenses, you're already in the red. So you're saying that SaaS as a business in itself has endemic problems.
Yes. I think the just to sort of extend that that line of thinking, right? I think SaaS is long in the tooth in some ways, right? So the original promise of SaaS, that it was, there is zero distribution cost, zero marginal cost, highly profitable margins, all
asset light, as Sidhu said.
Asset light. In effect, none of those things actually came true, right? If you look at any of the SaaS companies,
largely because of sales and marketing costs.
Because the entire vector of competition shifted to the sales side, right, to the distribution side.
I mean, basically, as building commoditized,
the building
selling
cost was not much, but every niche is populated with hundreds and hundreds of SaaS companies, and it's a race.
Why
to
will
the
that
bottom.
not happen with AI also?
Doesn't
AI make it even easier to get commoditized?
It would in the future, but today the state of the art is so primitive. We're looking at the internet in 2001 and from a builder's perspective. There's no tooling out there. There are no patterns out there. 4 months ago, we finally figured out that, boss, it's better to represent an agent as a graph, right? And that's baked into a framework. It's literally 4 months old that we've got a framework that represents. It is, nothing is figured out.
I get that. Sidhu, so my point is, SaaS took, Suman, to your point, SaaS it's long in the tooth. Maybe it took a few decades for its weaknesses to show. But as we've seen with AI, evolution cycles are being measured in quarters. So whatever is not, so why would that not be like, so, I mean, both of you, okay, Sumant, since you're actually in some senses the company which is actually a SaaS company which has morphed into a AI-driven company, my question to you is that what is your competitive advantage? What is your sustainable advantage?
No, that's a very good point. Obviously, something that has to keep all of us awake at nights as well. and the question that we sort of need to ask ourselves, both as sort of founders of startups and as the Indian SaaS ecosystem as a whole, is what is our right to win, right? So why is it that Indian SaaS firms, why is it that
it's not Viksit Bharat?
I wish, right? So, and that's a legitimate question, right? And that sort of brings us back to the nature of the game when AI is at the center of everything, right? So just like the entire SaaS model became a model where you would compete purely on your sales and marketing muscle, right? You raise a lot of money and you spend it trying to attract those eyeballs. So you had all of these fancy equations around, rule of 40, which is how fast can you grow even if you sacrifice profitability, right? So you had all of these kinds of things that, in a sense, if you look back on it, doesn't make sense at all. And that's what people talk about. The most important thing, of course, is data, right? So in the traditional SaaS world, data is, if you will, an effluent, right? But in the AI world, data is the fuel, right? So you can, and specifically, for instance, right, in our case, how is it that we want to win in the presentation space? We have built our own model, fine-tuned on thousands of good presentations that makes the quality of the presentations, the outcomes that we deliver much better, for instance, right? So without, talking up my own book, the idea is that now you actually have the AI tooling is a commodity, right? Everybody can call a GPT API call or whatever you want, some underlying frontier model. But how do you make the quality of your output much better than anyone else? So data, of course, is one important thing there. The second one, and which is again, I think, a silver lining for India, is that I think the eventual winners are going to be in the vertical SaaS domains, right? So vertical SaaS, you go long and deep into a single niche and you win only in that.
If you'd like to listen to the full episode, you can head over right now to the Ken and become a premium subscriber to catch up on everything else that we've discussed. Your premium subscription will also get you access to all of our long-form stories, newsletters, visual stories, and all the other podcasts that we produce. Or if you want to just sample full episodes of 2x2, you can do that by becoming a premium subscriber on Apple Podcasts at a really great monthly price. Lastly, if you enjoyed listening to this episode, let us know by rating the podcast on your favorite podcast streaming platform. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back next week with another exciting episode.